Welcome. I'm Halcyon, and this is the Hug Nation broadcast. Today's Belief Buffet dish is survival of the fittest. My friend Paul sent me this book, Braiding Sweetgrass. He said as he read it, he kept thinking about me. And I was so touched by that. So I brought the book with me as I went camping this weekend. And within a page, I was just like drawn in. I love it so far. Not finished it yet, so no spoilers. But the subtitle is Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants. And there is a heavy discussion of gifting within the book. Not within a Burning Man context, but within the context of the natural world and how the Indigenous people perspective of the origin story and the human's place in the world is that of the earth is gifting us the animals, the plants, the things that we need when we need them. And when it is a gift, our attitude towards them is much different than the traditional Western, modern, Judeo-Christian perspective of being dominant over the natural world, and we take what we want. She makes an illustration in the book. The author is Wall Kimmerer, about how, like, if she went to a farmer's market, and there was a time when she went to a farmer's market where things were just given to her when she was traveling, and people were just giving her things. And so she was like, wow, thank you. And then when someone offered her something that she wasn't sure she could use because she'd already received so much, she just declined it. Because a gift that you can't use, you haven't, like, I don't need that. I don't want to take that. But she said, if on the contrary, if it was a market where everything was very cheap, she probably would have just acquired more and more because it was such a good deal, and why not just accumulate? But because of the gift interaction, there is a responsibility. There is a relationship that happens in a gifting exchange. Not an exchange, wrong word, because a gifting is not an exchange. Although what she talks about in the book is that the exchange in gifting is an exchange of responsibility and connection. And so when you gift to somebody, you are saying, hey, you now you have a connection to me and to this, whatever is being gifted. She also has another a cool example of how important it is, or how significant it is, when we have a connection to an item. Like if you buy socks at the store, is her example. You got socks, big deal. Sometimes I will walk around in socks all day, and I don't bother putting on my slippers, even though I know that my socks are going to be ruined pretty quickly. Whatever, I'll just buy another pair of socks. But she says, if you're actually gifted a pair of socks that your grandmother knitted, you treat it differently. You see it differently. Your relationship to that is different because you have a understanding and a connection to its creation, to the energy of it. And so there's a preciousness that you have now a relationship and a responsibility. And what happens when we don't have that relationship and responsibility in our transactions? The argument, or the perspective she presents in the book, which I just think is so heavy, is that the core root origin stories of the Judeo-Christian Western world are so problematic and compared to the origin stories of the Indigenous people. And the Western Judeo-Christian is that of humanity being the peak of the natural world, and so are the dominant creature, and over having dominion over the natural world. Whereas in the Indigenous people, it is a a collaborative model, that they are of this community of the natural world. And even, I think even more fascinating to me was the idea that in the indigenous narrative that humans are a new young species. And that doesn't mean that we are now the newest and the best and the peak. It means that we are humble and naive, and we have so much to learn from the ancient plants and animals. And even our science is about kind of breaking down and identifying and looking at these pieces of the natural world, whereas the non-scientific native look at nature is more about this community, the connection, the roles that things play in their interactions and the interconnectedness. And even when we and so the Native American view is so much more about learning from nature, where we don't have that same humility. And even when we do, learn from nature, we kind of get it wrong. Like, we have this idea of survival of the fittest, and we interpret that or we have manipulated Darwin's findings to that of, the strongest are the winners. But it's not, the strongest survive or the most brutal. It's the fittest, survival of the fittest. And the fittest actually speaks to things like collaboration and things like community and things like working with a system, because that's how nature works. That's another way that we have messed up in our analysis of nature and trying to learn from it. I grew up with the metaphor or not the metaphor, excuse me, the literal explanation of how forests work is that trees compete for sunlight. And that narrative works with survival of the fittest. It works with the capitalist mentality of individualism and kind of fighting and struggling to make yourself win at the expense of others. But we have learned in the last 20, 30 years that model is wrong. That is not how forests work. This is a big point in Douglas Rushkoff's book, Team Human, where he says, the only way humanity can be saved is if we can update our narrative and our understanding of the natural world. It is not competing for resources. I mean, it is in some ways, but a forest is not competing for sunlight. A forest is collaborative. There is a network of mycelium underneath the ground that is sharing resources. Trees will emit pheromones to communicate to one another that, oh my gosh, I'm getting eaten by some beetle. Build up your stores of blah, 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 so that you can, survive this attack that's coming. So without that shift of our worldview, I would argue we are not the fittest. We have to find the fittest worldview so that we as a species can survive. And the individualism, the kind of capitalist survive, win and at others' expense, the dominance, the taking, clearly we can see that it is destroying the environment. And that is not a fit. That is not a system that is working and inflowing. That is a ill-fitting, out of alignment, broken system. And it will not survive. So as I was reading this book, I was so touched by some of these beliefs and the poetry of some of their narratives and their stories. But it was also so heartbreaking, and recognizing that this is so fundamental. These beliefs and how we look at the world is so fundamental to so many things, and it justifies so much behavior and so much of our values. And the other thing that was disheartening is just thinking about how difficult it is going to be to change any of that. You know, if I look at the like what goes on with attitudes about education, um, you know, we have a population of people that are enslaved into, sorry, too strong a word, are indentured into a world of student debt as they pursue their education. We have a education system that reinforces the origin stories and the kind of manifest destiny we deserve to take and dominate and win, that kind of that infectious parasitic attitude. And what will it take to change that on a basic educational level so that we can eventually grow out of this and shape ourselves into a species that is fit to survive? I don't know. I went camping this weekend, and it was the La Jolla Indian Reservation, which is where they often have Utopia, which is a beautiful Burning Man regional. And it was so cool to be back there with almost no people. So we went to hiking through these areas that I'm used to seeing with theme camps and dance stages and art. And it's just nature. And it's gorgeous. But even though the Burning Man community is very good at leave no trace, human beings are not. And as I walk through this empty campgrounds, the amount of moop, matter out of place, of bottles and popped balloons and wrappers and confetti, like tinfoil confetti, and just like, I mean, I picked up around our camp as much as I could, but when we were on a walk, I was just like, oh. And I've started to notice that so much now, of just that trash, that feeling of like how we clearly are not connected to the world. Because if you felt like this world is an extension of you, you would not act this way. We have this warped idea that we exist within the confines of our skin. That's me. And so I protect me and I protect my family, and have these blinders on of what the consequences are beyond me. I'm guilty of this. But the reality is that we are intimately connected. I mean, we cannot exist without breath, and breath cannot exist without trees. Within us, we are, I think, over half of the cells in our body are not human. They are, microbes in our gut and things like that. So this idea that we are separate is another fiction. And until we start to change the basic concept of what we are, who we are, and how we are connected, how we are a we beyond the identity of I don't know how we evolve our belief system to one that is sustainable. There's a line in the book talking about how important gifting is, and seeing the bounty of the earth as a gift, and how that changes your perspective of everything. It said, talking about hunting and how, the trust that the indigenous people had from what they would get from the land, and then the flocks would come in and they would be able to get the animals that they needed for food, and then she says, when you don't feel the warm feathers cool in your hand and know that a life has been given for yours, when there is no gratitude in return, that food may not satisfy. It may leave the spirit hungry while the belly is full. First of all, when you don't feel the warm feathers cool in your hand, meaning like when you don't witness a living thing, you don't hunt it, you don't kill it and watch it go from alive to dead, you do not have a sense of what sacrifice has just happened so that you can live. She says, something is broken when the food comes on a styrofoam tray, wrapped in slippery plastic, a carcass of a being whose only chance at life was a cramped cage. That is not a gift of life. It is a theft. Ugh. That was hard to hear or read, because I am currently an omnivore. For about 15 years, I was a vegetarian, and then introduced some fish to my diet because I was feeling some like brain fog, and actually felt like adding fish was helpful for me. And then over the last 2 years, I have slipped into eating meat much more regularly. And initially, it was only humanely raised, and lately I've eaten at restaurants and such without such a firm commitment. And that really hits home of like, this food is filling my belly, but not my spirit. My connection to food right now is not that healthy. And I wonder what the consequences of that are in feeling my connection to the world, to everything. So I am so grateful for Paul recommending or gifting me this book, for the reminder of the power of gifting in ways beyond that which I think about immediately from a Burning Man sense. And am really going to continue to go deep as to what I can do to feel deeper in those connections to the natural world, to my food. And I think in doing so to you and all. So I hope that you are feeling connected to the world and getting a chance to go outside and feel nature and remind yourself that we are connected. It is not something that we dominate over, that we can take from. It is something that we are integrally a part of and have a relationship with and collaborate with. So thank you for letting me share. I love you. Thank you for watching. Please hit the like, even subscribe, hit the bell so you see all the things that I do. I would love it if more people were aware of this channel and my videos, and you can help me by hitting like and subscribe. Thank you.